Welcome to the State of the Nation weekly update for the first week of August 2024. I'm your host, Mike Sham. This weekly update brought to us by Pace Car Rental. You better like and subscribe this channel, become a member, throw us some money. That's all the admin out of the way. Let's get on to the two issues that I want to deal with today, and the one leads into the other. Let's start off with the economy. The thing that's going to make South Africa succeed or fail, it's not going to be ideology, it's going to be money. Are we doing business? Are people gainfully employed? Do people see prospects to creating a better life for their children than what they have for themselves? And if so, we wouldn't have half the problems we've got. South Africa has been on a downward spiral for 15 years. 15 years of growth of 1%. In a country where the population grows at the rate of just over 2%. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to understand that that is unsustainable and that is making us poorer every year. But suddenly there's some green shoots. The government of national unity has managed to provide the world, the investment community, South Africans with a bit more policy certainty. And things are starting to look a little bit interesting. And it starts off with a recent meeting that was held at which the Bureau for Economic Research stated that they're looking at South Africa growing in excess of 2% next year, which means something. It just means that perhaps the nightmare stops. You know, we come off a very low base. But I think confidence, both domestically and internationally, about the South African situation has been so dire that some stability, some sign of cabinet ministers doing their job is making everybody a lot more positive. So let's look at what's driving this. Well, the government of national unity, for starters, has taken some of the more worrisome scenarios off the table when evaluating South Africa. What are those worrisome scenarios? Well, one thinks of, the other coalition that could have been formed. And the fact that that hasn't been formed is making people feel a lot more comfortable. Doesn't mean that we're doing things right. It just means that we had the potential to go down a far worse road than the one we're on at the moment. South Africa at the moment seems to be committed to market principles. We sent our Minister of Trade and Industry, Minister Parks Tau, to America to go and say, guys, we may want to send your friend Israel to the International Court of Justice and charge them with genocide, but we still want to be your pals. Can you forget about that and continue keeping us in the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which gives South Africa free access to the massive US consumer market? One of those kind of begging bowl visits saying, at least allow us to trade with you. Look, South Africa is still strategically important. You know, just for no other reason, but some of the big countries can't afford South Africa becoming the next Zimbabwe. Because if South Africa has to go the Zimbabwe route, it'll be Zimbabwe on steroids. There's a lot more to lose in South Africa than what there is to lose in Zimbabwe or Sudan or Mozambique or any of these other failed states. So, let's be clear here. There's still a lot that many of the world superpowers, especially those in the West, see. There's still the value that they see in keeping South Africa at least functional. The last thing they need is yet another failed state in Africa, especially a big one. So I think that Minister Parks Tau and his crew that went to plead with the Americans to not be so harsh on us will succeed. I think we'll be kept in the AGOA deal. And I think that some investors will throw us a few morsels of money, which we will gladly lap up. What has happened already? Well, what we have seen already has been a surprising strengthening of the rand. from its usual bad position against the dollar. It strengthened a bit, so we're seeing petrol prices go down. And with that, all prices at least stop going up as fast as they were, because, petrol is one of those things, or the fuel price is one of those things that seeps into everything that we spend money on, not just your travel, but to get your wonderful mug delivered to you, that costs money. To get it produced costs money. Fuel prices going down has a ripple effect throughout the economy. Investment people buying our bonds means the rate goes down on that. If there are more people looking to buy our bonds, which of course puts downward pressure for a change on interest rates, which means that we could see our interest rates getting cut, and many of the analysts are looking at multiple cuts of interest rates in the next 24 months. So this is all good news for the South African consumer, who is feeling like we've got a big rock on our chest at the moment, and hopefully as South Africa starts improving economically, the mood will improve. Everybody will just take a bit of a chill pill and just relax, and the country might do a lot better than what we've grown accustomed to over the last 15 years, right? And this all hinges on the status quo, which is the government of national unity pushing through. Now, what are the threats to this rosy scenario? Well, there are two threats. The one threat is the US has a very important election at the end of the year. It's a close thing. We know that Donald Trump isn't overly positively disposed to the South African government, especially with his support of Israel. That could take all bets off the table, because a Donald Trump presidency might be quite bad for South Africa and require a lot more diplomacy than what we've shown until now. However, just on the Donald Trump scenario, one must remember that we lived through 4 years of Donald Trump's first presidency, and, South Africa neither got anything good or bad out of the US. It was business as usual. We kept on trading with AGOA through the AGOA deal. South Africa wasn't disrupted too much. So I think really I do understand the sensational thinking of Donald Trump going to cut South Africa off. I don't think that that is a threat that I think it's a bit overblown, because I think that at the end of it all, international diplomacy comes into this, and they don't need a failed state, because a lot of that burden eventually of the failed state gets put on the shoulders of the Western powers when they need it least. Because remember, they've got a couple of wars going on, and the last thing they need is South Africa being a launch base for some of the opponents of those countries that we are talking about. The biggest threat to South Africa pushing through is a domestic threat. Now, earlier this week, we spoke to Frans Cronje in an interview that's going viral. If you haven't watched it, please click on this link. This is definitely one to watch. Dr. Frans Cronje is a guy who is in touch with the South African situation. He's very positive on the government of national unity. He goes into far greater detail, but I want to pick up on part of the other analysis, and that is understanding that there are people in South Africa that do not want this government of national unity to work. In fact, to many people in South Africa, this is their worst nightmare, right? And that is that a South Africa that runs on free market principles, that has got business and government in the same room, everybody singing Kumbaya, and the country growing at a hell of a rate, and the citizens getting wealthier and less dependent on the state. Now, as we know, some of the other, what do they call them, progressive forces, don't want people to be independently sustainable. They don't want people to be rich. They want people to be dependent on the state. That is what those so-called progressive parties want. They want absolute dependence on the state, because when people are dependent on the state gets to run everything. When the government's running everything, there's a lot more money. I'm in charge. I'm the minister of what. I can give myself 10 farms, a private jet. I can go off to international conferences. I don't have to worry about pesky elections. I don't have to worry about anything. I've got a subdued population, and they keep us in power, and this is great. And we've seen this replicated throughout unsuccessful countries around the world. Right? We are seeing this in many African states. We're seeing it in Venezuela. So please understand that those progressive forces do not want this government of national unity to succeed. And as per the interview with Dr. Frans Cronje, what could they actually do to derail it? How does that look? Well, possibly the most easiest way to do this is to get two things in place. One is that you run a media campaign that really says there is no national unity. We've got massive problems. Remember apartheid, remember colonialism, and look at what's happening in schools. So suddenly in the last week, we see an outpouring of a whole lot of incidents of racism at former white schools against black scholars. None of this with any proof, right? Just purely kangaroo court stuff, and the media laps it up and puts it all over the newspaper. And who's there? The ambulance chasers. Number one is the Gauteng legislature. The minute the Gauteng head of education pitches up there, suspends the principal, makes a big political issue out of a schoolyard dispute that hasn't been substantiated. Believe me, this one will go the same way as some of the other similar incidents, where eventually there'll just be an apology issued, because this is not this is just purely a case of trying to create a problem where there isn't a problem. Now, this is part of a strategy, and the part of the strategy is to say to the ANC government, by the ANC in Gauteng, how can you be in a government of national unity with white racists? You've got to get out of this, and if you're a true African liberator, you should be in coalition with the progressive forces. It's going to be an onslaught that South Africa better be ready for, because it's going to be really, really, really difficult it's going to become increasingly difficult for the ANC that have been in favor of the part of the ANC, the faction that is in favor of the government national unity, to fight off the faction that doesn't want national unity because they want hegemonic control with their mates in the so-called progressive parties. And as we said many times, what you then want to do is get the band together again, and you then see a coalition that has the ANC, the EFF, and Mkhonto weSizwe under one umbrella. And, it's under this president has to go because his government of national unity fails. We then have President Mashatile and Deputy President Malema. And that's quite clearly the plan here. So what I would suggest is, please understand that we are going to get a raft of this kind of story. It's not just going to be the odd story that comes out of one or two schools. It's going to be continual, and it's going to start, and it's going to be 90% of this is going to come out of Gauteng, because this is the one area that those people that do not want the government of national unity to work have a power base, and they're going to push it hard. And, there's every chance that the media plays a role of useful idiots by picking up on these stompies, these stories, and pushing them without any proof that this is the case. South Africa needs to succeed. And the only way we're going to succeed is by trading our way out of it. I want to turn to the country that recently had elections, and that's Venezuela. Now, what has Venezuela got to do with South Africa? Well, the great link is the so-called ideological link between Venezuela and the EFF, where the EFF have announced that South Africa must be more like Venezuela. Well, there's been a disputed election. Nobody knows who to believe, but it seems highly unlikely that President Nicolas Maduro, who is part of that movement that has kicked out private ownership out of Venezuela and has caused economic carnage in that country, right? He's claiming victory. He says he got 51%, announced it way before any facts or figures were shown. And, that country, which sits on some of the world's largest oil reserves, is an absolute state. And this is the country that the EFF says they want South Africa to look like. And they're just saying it, but they're not the only ones that are thinking it within that progressive movement. There are some statistics. More than a third of Venezuelans have fled the country, have left. Over 6 million people have left the country, right? I've spoken before about what they call in Venezuela the Maduran diet. The Maduro diet is that all Venezuelans, adults, have lost on average 10 kilograms. Now, that sounds pretty nice, but it's, there's ways of losing weight and ways of losing weight. They're losing weight because they literally can't get meals. This is the fate that waits an autocratic state without any property rights, without any private sector. Right? So let's understand how high the stakes are. At the moment, we have a honeymoon period. We've got a government of national unity, and all windows are facing the sea. It's looking great. The parliament looks like it's working. The constitution's holding. We all out there. The lights are on, and everything seems to be working. I told you the rosy economic scenario, and this could happen. But there are threats, and the biggest threats come from within. And the biggest threats can be dealt with by us, the public, as we stand up to these rumors, innuendos. We don't back them with our eyeballs, and we understand what's going on here. There's going to be a concerted effort to destabilize the government of national unity so that it never has a chance of success. Because remember, every day that goes by, every economic metric that comes out that is positive is another strike against those progressive forces that want to bring down the government of national unity. Right? The government of national unity has to climb the steps while those progressive forces are going down in the lift. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that the wind is not given to their sails, understand that these scandals are manufactured and they are done on purpose to destabilize the government of national unity. So, enjoy the economic upswing. And really, get out there, be positive about South Africa. This is probably the best thing that you can do, is get out there, be positive about South Africa. Go to dinner. Grow the economy. Employ people in your businesses. That's the antidote to the people that want to disrupt the country. Let's make South Africans not want to turn their back on the system that is working for them in favor of a system that we can guarantee will not work. How can we guarantee it? Well, we can look at probably 100 examples of countries that have tried the other system and it never works. So get out there, be positive, go have a meal, get out, have a picnic, do what you have to do a bit of shopping, buy yourself a new dress, get out there, do something, have fun. And good luck to our Olympic teams, and well done to Tatiana Smith, who announced her retirement after bringing home a gold and a silver medal. We are so proud of our Olympians, and enjoy the next week. We'll be back next week. Thank you for joining me.